Hey people, okay, this is an update of my cancer video because I've learned more. And as I was going through the raw material, I got to yet another reading about cancer. And just an FYI, this is kind of my second pass through the entire raw material. Um, and I purchased it in print form recently because I was just having too much trouble maintaining where I was at on the website and with PDFs and whatever. So, but these are great. This is these were published just a couple of years ago or something. Um, like I don't know, 2018, 2016, somewhere in there. 2018, 2018, and it looks like to me they are the re-listened version. So they've got the info about the United States making UFOs and stuff that's in reading number 8 that I don't think was in the original PDFs. Maybe it was. I guess there's just too much material for me to have a good handle on it, and I guess it's the way I spend time with it. I don't read this like cover to cover every day. I read this in pieces as I feel led. So anyway, enough rambling. Um, so this is from reading the raw material, reading 46 from April 15th of 1981. And they got onto cancer. They were asking about their cats, and one of the cats had cancerous growth, and they were about to take it in for procedure and stuff. And the raw material reiterates that the cancer is a growth as a result of anger. Um, okay, this is great. I think this is a good place to start. Is in 46.7, and they're talking about their cat, and the questioner says, I was just wondering if an entity polarizes towards the service to self path, would the anger have the same physical effect that it affects an entity polarized towards service to others path? And by the way, cosmology thing, this is Ra's take on good and evil. Since from the larger perspective, good and evil are kind of an imprint we put on things, it's our own kind of skew and bias. Ra, I think, simplifies things by putting things in terms of service to others and service to self. And so somebody who's like a demagogue leader like Genghis Khan was a good example of controlling other people, building this huge pyramid of people underneath him, and might makes right kind of thing. That would be a service to self path. And Ra says that lifetime after lifetime, this service to self is actually a path to the creator, just like the service to others path. Um, Except you find the creator within yourself, and you just get deeper and deeper, and until you get way out there. I mean, like we're talking demon, advanced demon Lucifer type level, with which uh, just don't pay attention to me. I'm just saying crap. But fifth density is way beyond. We're technically in third density right here on the edge to fourth, which is fourth density is what a lot of people think of as heaven, Christians, or the new heaven, new earth kind of thing, apparently. So fifth density would be like the level beyond that. And if service to self, fifth density, you like that's when it's kind of at its peak and optimum. And I guess at the end of fifth density, when you get ready for sixth, which is where the raw material people were at, uh, when you get ready for that, that's when you, at some point, you realize the futility of isolating yourself from everyone else, the inevitability of seeing the creator in others. And so this switch occurs where all fifth density entities who are polarized in service to self switch over to service to others, and then everyone is service to others, and that's our path back to God. So wow, and I'm sure there are tons of people that will have problems with that. My family has big problems with that when I talk about it. You know, it's a very radical antithesis to the Christian world life view of heaven and hell and punishment and sacrifice and atonement and all this stuff. But anyway, I'm rabbit trailing again. But those rabbit trails are the point, because the idea with these videos is I knew it would touch upon all of these huge cosmology questions, and it would give us a chance to talk about them in context. So the question is about, because in the reading just above, it's talking about how with entities getting angry, the anger is undirected and random. It results in the cancerous growth. And he asks if a service to self person would have the same problem. And the answer is the catalytic mechanisms are dependent not upon the chosen polarity, service to others, service to self, of the mind-body-spirit complex, i.e. a person, but upon the use or purpose to which this catalyst is put. So the anger, the use or purpose to which the anger is put. Thus, the entity which uses the experience of anger to polarize consciously, positively or negatively, and by the way, positively is supposed to be service to others, negatively service to self. It's just a shorthand for that. It's not supposed to be a value judgment, because Ra makes a point of portraying both as legitimate paths to God and has pointers for people on each path. But anyway, so positively or negatively, does not experience the bodily catalyst, but rather uses the catalyst in mental configuration. And this is what this gets into, and this is why I wanted to bring this up. Okay, so basically the questioner needed further clarification. So in 46.9, we get this phenomenal answer. So it's like this example. Okay, here's this example. The entity polarizing positively perceives the anger. This entity, if using the catalyst mentally, which is the appropriate approach that Ra is talking about, instead of just letting it turn into cancer. So if the entity uses this catalyst mentally, blesses and loves the anger in itself. The entity then intensifies this anger consciously in mind alone until the folly of this red ray energy is perceived, not as folly in itself, but as an energy subject to spiritual entropy due to the randomness of energy being used. And just short aside here, this entropy, this randomness of anger, the fact that it's just basically random red ray energy, is what manifests in cancer, because I guess it's so powerful, it has to manifest somewhere. So if you don't channel it, if you don't give it a path, if you don't use that energy and channel it into something constructive, which he's getting right into next, how to do that, if you don't do that, then it randomly turns into cancer very often in the body. Positive orientation then provides the will and faith to continue this mentally intense experience of letting the anger be understood, accepted, and integrated with the mind-body-spirit complex, within the self. The other self, that means the other person, which is the object of anger, is thus transformed into an object of acceptance, understanding, and accommodation, all being integrated using the great energy which anger began. I'm just going to skip the paragraph about negatively oriented entities for the moment. Control is the key to negatively polarized use of catalyst. Let's do the paragraph above I just skipped. Acceptance is the key to positively polarized use of catalyst. Between these polarities lies the potential for this random and undirected energy creating a bodily complex analog of what you call the cancerous growth of tissue. Good Lord, that's a huge phrase that he's just going to say, cancer. So you let it be random, it turns into cancer. Now, I'm going to read this other paragraph about negatively oriented entities because I don't want to be as biased as I feel like being. So, for people who are on the negative path and are interested in how this stuff works, the negatively oriented mind-body-spirit complex will use this anger in a similarly conscious fashion, refusing to accept the undirected or random energy of anger, and instead, through will and faith, funneling this energy into a practical means of venting the negative respect of this emotion, the negative aspect, so as to obtain control over other self or otherwise control the situation causing anger. So that would be the service to self approach. Anger, channeling it into control of the situation, control of the other person, whatever. Service to others, the positive path, being channeling the energy into acceptance of the anger. And they get into this in just a minute. Not just of the other person, acceptance of the anger for what it is. Okay? Acceptance of the situation, the appropriateness of the situation, the appropriateness of the anger, letting it flow through you, then, allowing it, just, it's like bring it on, let it flow. And as the situation continues, let it continue to channel that into accepting the anger, accepting the other person, accepting their role, accepting yourself for feeling angry. Okay, so acceptance being the key for the service to others, positive-oriented individual. Now, I just want to give an example because this is so vivid in my mind. I've gone through this so much in the fairly recent past. Not to say that I've done this perfectly. It's a learning process. But here's how I approached this. And it was after having read this once or twice over the years preceding that, and at least one time fairly recently before this stuff was happening, or around the time it was happening. I think it might have been about the time it was happening. And I'm not going to mention any names and stuff, but I'm a school bus driver, and as a school bus driver, you run into a lot of different personalities with kids, and some of them are ones that are very good for me because I need to learn how to do this, this anger thing, how to deal with it. And, just as an aside, it's like the way this seems to work out is the kids that have the strongest character, that make you the most angry and cause the most trouble and are the most difficult, or you would think, the most difficult to deal with, are vibrant personalities. I mean, they're wonderful. They're probably all indigo children. It's like it's phenomenal. They're phenomenal people. I mean, my respect for them is just without bounds. And that kind of grows out of this, which is strange. But so I had a typical scenario, where the kid's acting up and they're like, you can't tell me what to do. You're not my parent. And so, I'm like, well, I am your bus driver and we have to maintain order on the bus and all this stuff. But this goes on for weeks, okay, months of us pushing each other's buttons. The kid finding opportunities to act up and be in my face, and me finding ways to try to deal with it, and repeatedly throughout, even a couple of years previous to this, that when I was the bus driver, and throughout this time, when I would get this anger from these kids that would act up, I was experiencing all kinds of ways of channeling it constructively in the heat of the moment, in the situation, which is the hard part. Finding out, what is the best way to deal with this? What is the, I know there's a right way to do this. This is a phenomenal catalyst. It's a great learning opportunity. There's got to be, what is the best way? And I would use that anger. That gives you the motivation. Problems with a lot of times with spiritual growth and things, especially for me, is just motivation, giving them motivation to meditate and stuff. And if I'm just slaving away, forcing myself to do it day after day, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth and gives this sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. And it's like, why am I doing this? Why am I going through this? There's got to be something wrong. I'm approaching this wrong or something if this is so distasteful. So, motivation is like this, ephemeral, transitory thing that's hard for me to pin down. And sometimes I get some great motivation. And that's one thing I recognized immediately is while this was happening, while this anger was just flowing through me, this unbelievable energy is flowing through me, I've got all the motivation in the world to work on this. That's no longer a problem. Then the problem is just, where do I channel this energy? What do I do with it? And it was a process similar to this. I'm sure it was informed by this, informed by Paul Solomon, who talks about things similarly. Uh, but the way I was channeling it was, of course, in trying to accept the child, accept myself, accept the situation, accept the anger, and then what, and then try to move on in while you're in the heat of the moment, while it's still going on, and find just what's the appropriate way to act. There's layers to this thing. Number one, you have to control the immediate situation. If a kid's bothering other kids or standing up in the middle of the aisle or not sitting down, or there's immediate things you have to do, and then there's like your approach. My approach was everything. How angry or critical I was had immediate effect on the child and would immediately affect how I would come back. And being sugary and sicky sweet and artificially touchy feely and accommodating was not necessarily a good result. I knew attendants who would do that and they got the snot beat out of them by kids. Because some kids they're inflamed by that. I think it's the insincerity just drives them up a wall. So I was definitely trying to be sincere, but sincerely trying to find the constructive way to deal with this. And over the years, we eventually, over a year or so dealing with this kid, we worked it out. Mistakes were made on both sides. A lot of times I said things I regretted and apologized later, or might have been things I should have apologized for and didn't openly. Um, but we got to this point where we got this equilibrium. We respected each other, and the kids saw clearly that it was much easier for them to just sit down and mind their own business, and within the certain range in which they're not bothering other people, they could do whatever they want while they're right there on the bus, and that kind of resonated well, and the fact that they still had latitude, they could talk to other people and stuff, and I wasn't trying to like control them and just arbitrarily be mean and say, oh no, you can't do this, you can't do anything. I'm just trying to give them as much latitude as I can without having them be disruptive or bothering other people or be a safety concern or something, or disrespectful. Although that's a whole can of worms. Yeah, I don't want people to just respect me because I want them to treat me like I'm God just because it's an ego thing or something. No, no, no. It's I think I'm trying to think in terms of the world at large, how you treat other people. It's appropriate to treat them with respect, um, and at least that's a good way to know how to approach things, and to be able to do that when it seems appropriate or you want to. And I don't know, it turned out well, and now every time I see the kids, they're not on my bus route anymore, but I wave and they wave and we're all on good terms and everything. But so I went through this, and it's exactly like he describes, and you can do this like the raw material describes. I keep saying he, the raw. Apparently, interestingly enough, when they really got down to it, they were and they asked, they were talking to one entity, one person in the raw complex, social memory complex. But the confusion arises because this is like sixth density. It's way up there still. Okay, sixth density is like where I guess the complexes form. Entities all start to mentally, they merge together. They're all sharing their own thoughts and experiences and awareness, and it's not like they're all losing their identity, but there's a big sense to where they're getting this collective identity, and I'm sure I'm butchering that. There's probably way better explanations, but that's one part of it. That's a gist of it. What it means to be sixth density, and hence the confusion, because the raw always approaches it as if it's them, the social memory complex offering their input. Because even though maybe one individual involved in the channeling, that individual in the raw social memory complex is in contact with everyone, all the rest of them. So there isn't that kind of distinction that we think of. We think of, oh, you're talking to a person. Well, it's that person's viewpoint, that person's perspective, and it's the limitation. It's not like the limitations we have here. So that's why I keep saying him when I say raw. Just a shorthand, just a shortcut. Okay, and I think it was this next question that got to be really good. I'll just read it. 46.10. Then as I understand it, you are saying that if the positively polarizing entity fails to accept the other self, or if the negatively polarizing entity fails to control the other self, either of these conditions will cause cancer, possibly. Is this correct? And Ross says, this is partially correct. The first acceptance or control, depending on polarity, acceptance for positive, control for negative. The first is of the self. Anger is one of many things to be accepted and loved as part of self, or in the case of negatively oriented entities, controlled as part of self, if the entity is to do work. And they're saying if a negative entity fails, it will cause cancer, and the answer is yes. And here we go. I think this is getting into more details about what's really going on to cause this cancer, because they talk about the negative polarization contains a great requirement for control and repression. Oh no, I guess it's kind of a rabbit trail. This is about negative oriented entities. So that's kind of part of the negative path is repression, repressing emotions and controlling them and saving them for later, and like repressing bodily functions so you have more power later and things. Oh, and this is so good. The next question is, then the positively oriented entity, rather than attempting repression of emotion, would balance the emotion as stated in an earlier contact. Is this correct? Balance the emotion. Here's the answer. This is correct and illustrates the path of unity. Oh, that's not what I was thinking of. Oh, it goes on to the plan for the use of cancer and things. I don't know. That's I may have talked about this in a previous video. I don't think I did, and it's what I thought they were getting into here. There's some readings previous to this where they get into this viewpoint of being dispassionate in response to external stimuli. Because there's a bunch of questions in this earlier reading about what's the ideal response, the ideal person, the ideal individual, how are they responding to the exigencies of life, the ups and downs and the loves and hates, and they get into this example of like a person attacking you. If a person's attacking you, and they use two different examples, like one of a raging bull and one of another person that are attacking you. What's the appropriate like emotional response and things, and what the questioner thought, their take on it was like the Zen kind of thing. And I've heard this a lot from New Age types, where love and hate are not the goal. The goal is to be dispassionate. The answer, however, was no. The ideal response to this person attacking you is not being dispassionate. It's not ambivalence. It's not a lack of emotion. Okay, it is love, being filled with love. So that Ra's answer is actually the ideal individual, okay, who's ideally using catalyst is and has mastered these things when they're in these hard situations, where somebody's beating them up or attacking them or things like that are happening. I think those are good extreme examples of things that they seem to be really bad and negative. And what's the best way to deal with them, other than just turning the other cheek? Was kind of like ambivalence. Although that turning the other cheek, by the way, is apparently the appropriate thing. That's apparently a very good thing, according to Ra. But no, the ideal here, the emotional thing, was love. That you would be filled with love for the other person, and Paul Solomon got into that. How anger and hate are actually just other manifestations of love. And if you can see that, you can actually see how the more someone hates you and the more violent they are and the more intense their expression of hatred, the stronger the love, the purer the energy of the love. Um, so that's just another thing I wanted to get across. And I'm sure it bears on this anger and cancer type things and stuff. So I think the real valuable thing I got from that reading that was new. Man, I hope there's not something in there I'm missing that I wanted to talk about. The key thing that was new was this process that he outlines of a specific example of having anger, and how if you channel that energy, if you use that energy constructively, the energy from the anger. So Ra talks about using it mentally. You use that mentally in a constructive way, you're fine. You're in the clear. It's not going to turn into cancer. Ra is saying when it turns into cancer is when you don't use that energy. And so I hate to use the word repression, but in a different sense, not in the sense where Ra's talking about the negative-oriented individual using repression in a constructive way. I'm talking about how we repress things, like you experience the anger and you don't know what to do with it. It's just there. It's like you're angry at somebody, and the only way to get over it is to just not think of it. And so then, whenever you start thinking of that circumstance again, the anger comes back. So it's kind of like you never got rid of it. And I think that's the kind of situation we're always talking about, where it turns into cancer, is when that energy's there and you're not dealing with it. Okay, you're just thinking about something else. You're just avoiding the situation. Like if you're in a job, like I'm talking about, where you have situations that make you angry a lot because you're dealing with people or something, way in the context that leads to that. If your approach is to just leave that job and keep trying to find jobs and that avoid those kind of interactions. So you're avoiding those kinds of anger-causing incidents in work and in daily life, your social life. So avoidance, and if you're just not thinking about it, I believe that's conducive to causing cancer. Because if you're really honest with yourself, when you're in those situations, they are making you angry. You do feel angry. And not that I would say to be morbid and look for situations that are like that. I think, we each get a measure of what we can handle and what we need as far as Catalyst is concerned. That's all kind of part of our plan for ourselves, or God's plan for us, however you want to look at it. But when it happens, to fully face it. This is what Ra's talking about. You focus on it. So instead of diverting the attention of your mind, you focus the attention of your mind on that anger and on the situation, and feeling that energy run through you. And this is what I wanted to convey to you. I guess that's why I wanted to do another reading, because it really resonated with another video. It really resonated with experience I had. Is that's exactly what happens. You have this tremendous energy from the anger. And I guess that was the first step when I immediately had to start dealing with this, is to take a step aside. And it may have taken me a while to get to this point, where once I get angry, I would just kind of mentally sidestep and look at myself and look at the situation and just appreciate the energy. That there's so much energy there, and realize that it wasn't really positive or negative. And those were labels we put on things. And if I really wasn't attached to a given outcome or something, it wasn't, a positive or negative thing in that sense. It was just this energy. And that really resonates with what Ra is talking about, because that's exactly what it's like. So that's kind of a thing you can look for when you're in that situation. Find that energy and just take a step back mentally and realize, see it for what it is. It's just this pure energy that comes up within you. It doesn't mean you have to go out and hit the other person. It doesn't mean it has to immediately translate into some kind of negative or horrendous act. It doesn't mean you have to slam your fist into a table or anything. The first thing is to just appreciate it for just the pure energy that it is, and then be grateful for it. And I was, that's the thing that hit me. I did not have this reading clearly in my mind when I was going through that stuff, although it was probably in my subconscious from having read it halfway recently. But that's exactly what it was like. You appreciate it. You're grateful for that energy, and then it's like, oh great, well now I've got all this energy I can use in dealing with the situation. And for me, a big part of it was mental. I have all this energy I can use to because it takes a lot of energy to take a step back and when your gut's tightening up, you'll force it to calm down and you'll let it. It's like you have this energy to hold yourself back and analyze the situation, and then really look for the constructive outlet, look for the constructive things you can do, and find your way, and this would happen again and again with this kid and some other kids on the bus, and it was a great opportunity for me to go over and over this process and get better and better and quicker and quicker, and it gets to the point where you basically immediately you're here with this anger, and you're immediately integrating, accepting it, the energy, accepting yourself, accepting the other person, being grateful, feeling this joyous gratitude for the experience, because it's such a valuable catalyst, and joyously using that energy appropriately. And I can't say for every instance in every example what's going to be the appropriate way to do that. That's the game. That's why we're here. That's up to you to discover when you're in that situation. There's no way I can know that. But Ra does give some valuable pointers here about the fundamentals, which are the acceptance. First, the acceptance of self, the acceptance of the anger, acceptance of the other person, and then the love of self, love of the anger, love of the other person. I'm kind of imposing that on what Ra said, but I believe that's, from my perspective, that's what he's talking about. And that's what I feel. It's like that gratitude, that love, that great positive energy. You get from the situation. So that was my I wanted to do another follow-up on the cancer video, because I think there's some really valuable information on there on exactly how you accept it. Because I think in my previous video I was just going by my instincts I understood at the time, which is more like letting things go. But I think that's kind of sidestepping the issue, and this is the appropriate way to deal with it that he's talking about. And in a way I could kind of kick myself, because I should have known that, because I've been through situations like that. I guess I just didn't understand they were as applicable as they are, because he used examples like that of something that makes you angry and dealing with it. Yes, I should have had a clue, but anyway, so that's what I wanted to get across, and I think we hit on that fairly well. I want to get into cosmology more. That's why, really, one of the main reasons I want to do these videos, outside of a desire to help people and get this information to some people that may really help, is to, for critical things like cancer and stuff, but it's also to deal with this cosmology. Because I'm sure there's a lot of you out there watching this video that are like me, who you're reading this stuff, and the more you read, the farther you get down the rabbit hole, so to speak, or it's actually, of course, the the more you free your mind, or the better, clearer a perspective you get on the true nature of reality, or a better perspective anyway. The more it isolates you from other people. That's what it does to me. It's like, the farther I get into stuff like this, who can you talk to about the raw material? Unless you got a group of people somewhere around you that are also into it. Who can you talk to about Solomon and Casey and stuff? And this stuff is some of the most divisive. I don't want to bash any particular religion, but as I was in the Christian religion, fundamentalist Christianity, and Casey said in the late 90s when I was reading this stuff, he said, we shall begin to understand more fully in 98. He was talking about prophecy and things, I think. But that was when I was going through the stuff and reading it. So to me, it was really significant. And in 98, I was reading the stuff, and Casey's saying, stay within your religion. Stay within the church you're in. You don't have to leave it. So my first wife and I, we did that at the time. We tried doing that, and it's just, you can't talk to those people about this stuff. There's so many points where you can't, you're stepping on the toes of the pet theology, the pet doctrines, that you can't really get anywhere. You can't have a meaningful discussion. And so I even, my cousin sent around this questionnaire where you answer 100 questions or something, or a lot of questions, and it tells you what religions you're the closest to. It gives you kind of a readout. And the one I was closest to was New Thought. And then some of the New Thought denominations were like, I think, Christian Science and Unity. And Christian Science, I don't know, it said too many bad connotations in my mind, so I didn't really want to, for whatever reason, I didn't want to go into that. But Unity I'd never heard of, so I looked into them and found a Unity church here in Ames and went to it. And I don't know, that was great. I was there for a couple of years, and there's some great experiences. Those are great people, some very, very, developed, advanced people spiritually and things, and they're into meditation and stuff, and it's all great. But man, the minute you start talking about channels like Casey and Paul Solomon, because from the Unity perspective and the founders of Unity, it's all about like introspection. So it's kind of like your own internal kind of channeling thing to arrive at these truths, which of course is a valid path. But as far as these other channels that were so helpful to me, it's like they didn't want to talk to about them. And there were some people in the church that knew about Casey and stuff, and they were open to it and positive about it and stuff. But it was just kind of a divisive thing, and so that's one reason I want to do more of these videos. Is I want to talk more about this cosmology and as it applies to daily life. The cosmology meaning the life, the universe, and everything, and how all the big picture of who we are, why are we here, how does this all fit together. And maybe I'll have some more readings on that. I should probably get her book first. Carla Ruckert, who's the channel for the raw material, I believe she's passed away now. I'm not sure how much of a hand she had in compiling this. It was the Re-Listening Project. There were a bunch of other people involved in it. And whoever they are, thank you for doing the re-listened version and giving it these. There's 2 volumes, by the way, of the raw material. It's the whole thing is just in, probably have these in the wrong order, whatever. Volume 1 and Volume 2. Backwards, whatever. It's all in these 2 volumes. Each one is like, I don't know, 500 pages. And each one has a full index for that volume. So they also released for $10 you can get this, which is the index for both volumes, which is kind of a different way of doing it, but it's helpful. So especially the raw universe in 3 handy books. I love it. Thank you, people, for making these. And then just in passing, Seth, there's a friend of mine that I met through all this stuff that's been trying to get me to read Seth for over a decade now, or probably almost a decade, for a long time. And I started reading Seth, and again, getting frustrated because of losing my place in PDFs and Adobe Reader not having a good way of doing bookmarks and stuff. And just having an old-fashioned book that I can pull out whenever, don't have to be in front of a computer to read it. It's got a bookmark, never forget where I am. It's been great. By the way, it's just a phenomenal book on Seth. It's like the newest release of one of the first Seth books. And the original guy who wrote the stuff down, went back and he puts in all his little notes and things that he took while the channeling was going on, the timing of, just, it's great. Great book. Raw material, books, phenomenal. I just love these. So anyway, that's kind of where this is going, what I want to do with this. Please, if you have questions, comments, suggestions, other insights, things I may have missed, I'm sure there's plenty. I've probably missed a lot from that one reading. But, yeah, just feel free to comment and share and enjoy. And hopefully that will lead to new videos and things. And good Lord, this already went on to 40 minutes. I apologize to people who are impatient for having to bear with me through this whole thing, especially the dead space where I'm just looking at a book. Should probably edit that out, but I don't know if I'm going to. Anyway, so yeah, share and enjoy, and we'll see you next time.